I'm not going to do any Alex Jones impersonations. I'm going to try to get it out of my head that he dressed up like a frog and did a Schmigel impersonation and just give you some data here. Tyrone B. Hayes, 2010, March 1st, Atrazine paper about turning 10% or 5% of the freaking fogs gay. Titled one of the weirdest feuds in history of science. This activist who claims no bias while being a scientist did a study that is not able to be reproduced by anybody unless they're already an advocate. If you have to be a true believer to make someone able to walk on water, you're probably not doing science. By the way, you can just, put a bunch of wood down and stand on the wood. That's one way to walk on water. But anyway, all other attempts to reproduce his results failed, as they found the following. This will give you an idea of what the actual results were and what they weren't able to do. They weren't able to reproduce hermaphrodite frogs at all. There was no increase of aromatase as measured by aromatase mRNA induction, this is one of the more studied animals, and it's also been cloned because they use it like it's a lab rat for certain types of tests. No increase in vitellogenin, another marker for feminization. Now, why is that word used, and why would you use these frogs? I'm just going to cut to what they have going on with them. It takes 2 years for them to reach sexual maturity, and during that period of time, you can't have them exposed to anything unusual or in any variation whatsoever. It simply has to be made literally impossible for them to be exposed to differing behavior or chemical exposure or different kinds of water or even pH or temperature among the control that you don't expose to your test material and the test bunny guinea pig ones. Now, the most important thing of this is in 2 years you have to make it to where you don't know which ones are exposed to what and make it a real double-blind study. Why? Because a lot of this is subject to observation and opinion of their development, and hopefully nobody hedges bets by maybe putting in, I don't know, hormones in the water, which would have an effect on frogs' development early and later. African clawed frogs have a cloaca, which is the chamber through which digestive and urinary system waste pass through, as well as reproductive system processes. So you have to take that into account, that not only what they eat or drink or exposed to, but what their body starts filtering out of itself as toxins. Yes, I'm using the magic word that people use on the internet. Besides taking that long to mature, they're known to be tetraploid polyploidy creatures. What that means is they have 4 copies of the chromosome sets. Not 2 like humans, but 4. Actually, it's 4 pairs, which means there's more DNA chains that you could have be mistranscribed during development as an egg from a single cell. And then afterwards, have non-errors occur in that 2-year period of time before they actually mature, for them to have gene expression damage occur, because it takes them that long to age. That means the cell divisions are occurring. So the reason you use an animal for a model is either A, it's less likely to have any reaction to anything you expose it to, or B, much more likely to react to literally everything. Rats are used for cancer studies because they spontaneously gain cancers a lot. They burn out quick because they live fast and die young. Combining that with the fact that you have I'm sorry, he's an activist. So, subconsciously or not, it doesn't matter. I don't think that this should be done. Next, again, nobody was able to reproduce this study unless they're a true believer. And more important, he refused to reveal his data. That makes his scientific paper absolutely invalid because he doesn't release all the information. He won't. And then if you ask him to do that, he accuses you of being involved with a very specific company that's attacking him, that supposedly defunded him during the research, when they defunded him a decade earlier because they were done having a study done, which may mean that he has a conflict of interest, or maybe he's got an axe to grind. I don't know. Also, the study was actually funded by the people that he was testing it on because they wanted to find out if this was an issue. But the title of the paper is Atrazine Induces Complete Feminization and Chemical Castration in Male African Clawed Frogs, and then the scientific name for it. But the part that's in parentheses of complete feminization is 10% of them. Now, why would they say complete if it's 10%? Well, here's the funny part. Only 2 out of 40. It was actually 4 out of 40 is the 10%. 2 of those were then considered atrazine-induced females, and they were typical females. What's not mentioned is whether or not a DNA check was made to make sure that they were actually males that were expressing as females. Next, they mated successfully, but were supposed to be genetically male, but are now physically, externally, subjectively female. Okay. And produced viable eggs. Okay. And that produced only males that lacked DM-W, a marker, according to his data that he won't release. So his conclusion wasn't that he really just had 2 females in the bunch, or 3, or some other thing happened. He decided the atrazine-induced females were, in fact, chromosomal males, but it doesn't show any chromosome testing. I'm sure there was, but the trouble is, I've actually looked at this before, and did I mention they have 4 sets of complete copies of DNA sitting in them? Which DNA strand did you pick? Which chromosome grouping? Did you check to see if they were chromosomally non-consistent or chromosomally abnormal in the first place? That's not been answered. If you ask him that, he won't talk to you. Oh, and all the animals are destroyed. What about tissue slices? No? Did you give it to the university so they could do double checking to make sure you didn't make any dumb mistakes? No. Sequential hermaphrodites are animals that can switch sex as adults because they have the gonads of either sex but different periods in their life. And another type are creatures that can change spontaneously because they are born with multiple sets, and it can be induced by hormonal changes. Now, the hormonal changes can be caused by water, environment, stresses, or gene expression that happens later in life, which is what this usually does. They have both sets of gonads, and again, this creature, like a chicken, has everything basically built in. So, did you know that chickens can change gender too? Yeah. It's just DNA swapping. They don't care. I don't think this guy was ever a farmer. Now, one of the things he induces or invokes is systematic racism. He's from UC Berkeley, did I mention? And a bunch of other hand waves to I'm being persecuted and overt paranoia, and has a history of doing things that would get him kicked out of any university that was run by sane people, but maybe not. And now he makes about $10,000 every time he does a public speaking tour thing. And if you ask him to do a public speaking tour without paying him, I don't know if he'll do it, but maybe he will. He gave a TED Talk. But they're not gay. They change gender in the same way that you or I could take hormones and change our gender. It would force our bodies to change. Very dramatically, I might add. See also Blair White. But the point about this is that they weren't turned gay, they would be turned transgender, and in this case, it's a creature that has a tendency of having a high likelihood of this happening, which is the reason it was used for a test. And out of 40 test subjects, which may not have been double-blind tested, only 4 of them showed, in his opinion, subjectively, by physical exam, that they were, scream louder, females. Only 4. And only 2 of them were mated and produced eggs. So that's about it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Now I got